Welcome on in, football fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS and prop preview for tonight's Monday Night Football matchup between the Saints and the Chiefs. Got to break down how to approach your GPP lineups, a little bit of an injury report, a player-by-player breakdown to make sure we're all on the same page, a few lower-owned game scripts, diamonds in the rough for some value, and then towards the end of the video, going to go over to the Underdog and Prize Picks side and break down the prop side. So we've got 4 props I've already entered over there that you guys might want to consider getting to yourself, and a lot to talk about here, so let's not waste any time at all and start it off with, first off, a look at the Draftkings side and what to do out there with your Showdown lineups. It's still pretty early in the year, so not a ton of injuries to talk about, but a few guys that have already been rolled out that are going to matter. First and foremost, you've got Taysom Hill, Rashee Rice, we knew weren't going to be playing this week, but also a few injuries towards the bottom end of the board. So the most notable in terms of a tag of players that might actually suit up would be a Mecole Hardman out there for the Chiefs. So still questionable. We'll have to see if he suits it up or not. If he does, maybe worth a GPP flyer or two, but not going to change the usage rates all that much. So we have most of the information that we need out there for tonight. So let's go ahead and start it off towards the top end of the board. In terms of your chalk, where your ownership's going to land, I would say that the Chiefs side is going to be a little bit more popular as the home team, as Slate favorites. That is usually going to be the case, but I think you're going to see a ton of 3-3 builds. The passing attacks of both teams seem to be the strength at this point. You've got the Chiefs that have been really stout against the run, so I'm not sure that Kamara is going to be that popular in rushing heavy builds. And then on the flip side, you've got Pacheco who's out, you've got Kareem Hunt leading that backfield, so you'd have to think that there's a lot of passing for Mahomes. So that's going to be that popular script that a lot of people are leaning into. Not that I disagree with that. I think that those takes are perfectly reasonable, but it is going to mean that in your large field GPPs, that 3-3 builds with one quarterback from each team. So if you went with, obviously Mahomes, Carr together, those kind of builds are going to be what the chalk is. So if you're looking to build for that, maybe in single entries trying to tail that, it'd probably be both quarterbacks, one, maybe 2 wide receivers from each team. If you want to get different out there in the large field GPP, I think all you have to do is simply stack either team. If you went with a 4-2 or a 5-1, especially for the Chiefs or the Saints, you're going to instantly be different right there. I would say that your usage rate is going to be 2-3, maybe even 5 times less than those 3-3 builds. So if I was entering the big 50,000, 100,000 plus entry contest, I would just set a roll to not have any 3-3 lineups. Now, if you're playing single entry, cash those kind of builds where you don't have to be as different, right? That's where the scenario changes. But large field GPPs, I think it's a pretty simple process tonight. Just go out there, build some correlated lineups, and sure, it might end up a close competitive game, and you might lose out there in the large field GPPs, but at least you're going to be building lineups properly. You're not going to be sharing your players, your usage with half or even a quarter of the field out there, and you're going out there trying to find some unique lineups, and hopefully when you bank, actually take down first place, and you're not sharing it with 2,000 or 3,000 other entries. But let's go player by player now. I'll give you an idea of how I'm attacking this slate. Of course, guys, for my entire player pool, for all of my projections, check out the Patreon page. You can see over here on the right, there's a link in the description of the video to that, but more so going to give you an idea of how you could use them in different scenarios. So up top, Alvin Kamara, I think he can get there both on the rushing and receiving end. I mean, he's proven that he's a 4 or 5 reception kind of running back out of the backfield, but also capable of putting up nearly 100 rushing yards. What that does is it makes him viable in a multitude of different scripts. Whether you're going to use him as a buyback in a Chiefs build, he'd be a very expensive buyback up there at $11,400, but he fits those kind of builds. He can get that receiving upside. Maybe they're playing from 2-3 touchdowns down, and he gets you those 7-8 receptions. So you've got that aspect, that avenue to success. You've also got the fact that he could go over 100 rushing yards, which makes him usable pretty much regardless of what lineup you're entering. So I think that's part of the reason that he's your highest owned player on the slate. He fits a multitude of different game scripts. Also your most expensive player and highest projected player on the slate. You've got Mahomes here at $11,000. The one issue is the price tag. I mean, he is way too expensive at $11,000. So at the captain spot, I couldn't see using him out there tonight unless I was going with a 4-2 or a 5-1 Chiefs build. So Mahomes, he fits lineups if you can fit him in salary-wise, but probably a little bit more expensive than we're hoping for. Speaking of price tag, Chris Olave at 10 grand, also a little bit of a steep price tag there. In fact, in terms of his points per dollar, he is the worst play towards the top end of the board, but coincidentally, also a little bit lower owned than those top 2 options. So if you're in those large field GPPs, I think potentially using Olave at captain could give you some of that differentiation. But in terms of my single entries, my cash lineups and all of that, these top two options, if you have the salary, are worth going out there and squeezing in. Derek Carr is maybe my favorite play on the slate. In fact, he might be my highest exposed play that I'm getting to, because with the tough matchup against that Chiefs front seven, I think you're going to see them try and spread the ball around. So I could see Carr having a bunch of different receptions, a bunch of different completions, as you say, out there to different wide receivers. So maybe it's not an Olave that gets there at captain. Maybe it's not a Shaheed who goes out there and gets there himself, but rather more of an entire team that goes out there and has success. And if so, it might be Carr that you have to have in lineups. He's only $9,600. So I think the price tag is more than fair down here in this 9K range. And what I really like is the ownership. He's only 38.4% owned, which I think is far too low owned for the kind of upside he brings. Part of that is because of Kelce being popular, about $1,000 cheaper. Also, these 11K plus options, I already said, are some of the best plays you can get to on the slate. So you just can't use everyone up top. So I think if you're going to play Carr, you could go Carr then one wide receiver as your buyback in a Chiefs 4-2 lineup. Or if you're using him more in a traditional 4-2 Saints lineup, I really like the idea of him spreading around the ball a little bit. Xavier Worthy could see an uptick in production and snap share with Rashee Rice being out, but he was more of a gadget player to begin with. So the bigger usage bump comes down to Travis Kelce. There's third downs, those setup plays where you're trying to get that yards after catch. I think a lot of what Rice was doing is comparable to Travis Kelce, right? Worthy, more of that speedster, right? You're going to run him on some of those fly routes, those end arounds, that sort of thing. Travis Kelce can find the soft spot in the zones and can go out there and fill that Rice role. So I actually have Kelce getting a much bigger projection jump than what you have here with Xavier Worthy, and you'll see that reflected with ownership, though. He is going to be much, much higher owned than you have there with Xavier Worthy. So maybe in your single entries, your smaller field stuff where you don't have to get different, I would love Kelce in those builds. GPPs, though, you might want to consider Worthy. He's got that big play upside, and if he gives us one of those trademark long touchdowns, you're going to have him out there in your lineups. Rashid Shaheed, great points per dollar projection here at $8,000. Definitely got a sizable increase in price tag, but that is warranted with how good he's looked this year. Kareem Hunt is going to be the number one running back for the Chiefs, but still going to be spelled by a P. Ryan. Also, Carson still getting some touches as well, so I'm not sure if he's going to get the kind of bell cow back usage that you'd be hoping for. Perine, if the Chiefs get behind, could see a big uptick in his usage as he's more of a receiving back, more of a blocking back out there for the Chiefs. So if you're going to play some Saints-heavy lineups, I do not hate Perine at all out there for a buyback. These kickers are just average plays at best. I do slightly prefer Butker over Groupie. Carson Steele, more of a GPP flyer just because he is the number 3 running back for the Chiefs now. These defenses could get there. They're more GPP plays, though, as their actual projection is pretty low in this kind of slate. Justin Watson always has big play upside, but is more GPP worthy as he's really boom or bust. He's got a non-existent floor, but does have a 10-point ceiling if he can get one of those big plays. Jamal Williams, if you think the Saints are going to roll tonight, if you're playing some 4-2 or 5-1 lineups out there, he'll get a lot more usage if they're playing from ahead. Juju Smith-Schuster, he's at least playing snaps for the Chiefs, but he's been old and crusty for years, so I really wouldn't expect any production out of Juju other than PPR stuff. If he maybe gets you 3-4 catches, might get to like 7-8 points. Noah Gray, on the other hand, does have some red zone upside, has been playing a lot more snaps out there for the Chiefs this year as well, and if they go with more 2 tight end sets with Rashee Rice out, I think Noah Gray could see an uptick in production as well. So I know before we mentioned Kelce potentially getting that uptick, but you also saw that a little bit with Noah Gray. Jawan Johnson will be the number 1, maybe number 2 tight end out there for the Saints tonight. They've got Foster Moreau here as well, and with Taysom Hill out, both of these guys are going to play snaps. They already ran a lot of 2 tight end sets over there in New Orleans, but now that you have Taysom Hill out, you have 2 traditional tight ends. I think you're going to see that even more. So if you're looking for some value, my favorite option would be Jawan Johnson. I'd say number 2 would be Noah Gray, but Moreau's probably number 3. These 3 tight ends down here have, in my opinion, the highest floor of any of these players, and you've got your Sky Moores, your Wilsons, Hardmans, even Tipton out there for the Saints. You've got some options down here, but we don't know how much they're going to play. I'd say at most you're giving these kind of players 25 maybe 30% of snaps out there tonight for tonight's matchup, whereas Juwan Johnson's going to play over 50%. Foster Burrow probably in that same kind of range, a little bit over 50%. A Noah Gray over here could be 30 to 40% of snaps. That is going to be a lot higher than some of these other players. So if I was playing in single entries outside of like the 50, 100,000 entry kind of contest, it'd be a lot of these tight ends out there in my exposure. If I was in a GPP, if I really had to get different, let's say I was chalky for my first 3-4 players, then maybe I do play one of these pure punt plays down here. And I guess if I had to point a few out, Tipton is my favorite pure flyer. I would say Hardman, if he plays, he is still questionable, would probably be my number 2 flyer, but you know, these more reliable options, these tight ends that are playing more, at least in my higher dollar stuff, are where I'll be getting my exposure. And now for the prop side of things, where we've got 4 props I've already entered over here on Underdog and Prize Picks that you might want to check out yourself. So first off, best place to start going to be with this discounted prop on Derek Carr passing yards. He's normally at about 211.5 out there on books, but the reason why this discount makes sense is it's nearly 30 yards lower. And anytime you guys can find a discount over here on these sites, you should be taking advantage, entering them for pretty much all the money you can. And while you can only enter, I think it depends, $5 if you're super limited, maybe up to $30 to $50 if you're non-limited on Prize Picks, you should be fully taking advantage of it. So whatever your limit is, go out there, make sure you enter it on this kind of combination. And it doesn't have to be this Travis Kelce prop that you're going out there and pairing it with, but try to find the best option on the board for you. The reason why I like this over on Kelce is the fact that you have Rashee Rice out. I've already mentioned during the fantasy section that I think he's going to see the biggest increase in usage. A lot of that because he fits that same sort of role. He's that third down target, will find the holes out there in zone coverage. Rashee Rice has turned into that player this year, and obviously going to be sidelined for quite some time now. I think you're going to see Kelce get back to his old regular self. It's not so much that, you know, he's over the hill. I think a lot of people were saying that, and, you know, it just makes me chuckle as he'll be a first ballot Hall of Famer someday. But at the same time, I thought of his opportunity, right? You can only do so much if you're not getting that opportunity. A lot like what you're getting with Mark Andrews, where it's not so much that he's old crusty. I'm sure he's not nearly as productive as what he used to be, especially after some of the injuries, but Isaiah Likely is just that guy, right? Sometimes opening up a little bit of usage can get players back to what they looked like before. So that's what I like here with Kelce. I think you saw that last week, right? If you take a look at his yardage, his receptions, his targets after Rashee Rice left the game, it was all very comparable to what we had in 2023. And, you know, if I put you in a time machine, we went back to 2023, and I gave you this 59.5 receiving yard line, you'd be hammering the over out there on it. So that's the idea. I think you're going to see more of that traditional Kansas City offense tonight, and the biggest beneficiary by far would be the tight ends out there for the Chiefs. And then over here in Underdog, before I give you guys these 2 plays, I'll remind you guys, for all of my prop exposure, you can find that over there on the Patreon page, link in the description of the video, just like we had over there for DFS. It's $15 a month. You can join the DFS tier. I'll give you all the spreadsheets that you see throughout my content, and $15 a month will also get you access over there to the prop tier. So if you're looking for the Underdog Prize Pick stuff, check out the prop tier. DFS is the DFS tier, so obviously check out what you guys are looking for yourselves. But over here on Underdog, 2 props that I really like. So first off, it's going to be this over on Patrick Mahomes passing yards. Is at 235.5, and it's a pretty decent matchup against the Saints defense. They've been pretty soft against the pass for most of the year. They've lit up over 240 passing yards to opposing quarterbacks, and now that you've got Pacheco out, you know, they're using Kareem Hunt as their number 1 running back. They're likely going to be a little bit more pass heavy. They can, you know, trust Hunt a little bit. They'll probably give him his 12 to 15 carries. I think we're going to see a majority of their usage is through the air. So that's why I like this over. The matchup was pretty decent. Close spread, should be a relatively competitive game. And at home, Mahomes has gone out there and historically been a lot better than what he has on the road. Then the other side of this, we got a multiplier on this Alvin Kamara over in touchdowns. You guys know that I absolutely love this Vulture program when it comes to props, as it gives you a much bigger bump when it comes to your EV than most people out there are realizing. And I would say that this situation with Kamara is one of the worst ones when it comes to the Vulture program. Ideally, we're looking for a situation like the Lions, where you've got Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery that have an extremely high touchdown equity. But even Jamal Williams, he's capable of stealing a 1-yard touchdown. They might run the ball with a Shaheed down there on the goal line. All of those would be just adding on to that void/push equity that you get with this Vulture program. And if you don't know, right, it's if they get their touchdown stolen by a non-quarterback, you will get this completely refunded. And because it is a two-man slip, that would give us a refund regardless of what Patrick Mahomes goes out there and does, which is why I like this program over here on Underdog. So Kamara, by the way, he's about even money on most books to score, including Pinnacle, where he's actually a little bit favored to go out there and score tonight. The reason why I bring up Pinnacle in particular is they have the yes and the no option available out there for the anytime touchdown prop. And other sites like Draftkings, FanDuel, he's in that minus 130 range to go out there and score. So with the multiplier at 1.05x, right, you're getting a slightly higher payout. I emphasize slightly because it's not that big a difference. But when you give me that, the Vulture program, the fact that this is a close competitive game he's favored to score, is why it's a no-brainer for me to go out there and mix in. So if you guys are trying to find all the rest of my exposure, that will be posted over there on the Patreon page. If you're a fan of trying to find some plus EV leans like we had here in a few cases, and then trying to marry that up with that traditional analysis, and that's what you're going to get over there on the Patreon page. Worth noting that Mahomes is at 236.5 on some books, and on DraftKings was like minus 125 over, so that was a little bit, and I'll emphasize a little bit, of a plus EV lean. And then over here, you also had Kelce at 58.5 on a few books, 59.5 on a few others, and most books he's juiced a little bit towards the over too. So that's what I try and do, try and find plays that the stats, the projections all go out there and back up. And then if the sports books are also giving us some juice on it, it's usually a good sign out there for our exposure. So that's my process. Hopefully you found it helpful out there for tonight. Let's go out there, crush our exposure, and have yourselves a Monday evening. That's all for the Monday Night Football preview. If you enjoyed this, smash the like button before you guys hop on out of here, and also subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the content to come. That'll include our Thursday Night Football preview, our Week 6 main slate video dropping a little bit later on in the week, and of course, all the content throughout the rest of the season. We've also got a golf tournament this week, the Black Desert Classic, so going to be covering that over there from the PGA side, and all the exposure throughout the rest of the season. So it's a good time to be a sports fan. We've got a lot going on, a lot of content coming out here on the channel. I appreciate all your support here as per usual, guys. And for a chance to earn a free month on my Patreon page, go ahead, comment down below who you've got as the top scorer tonight. If you can give me the top score and their score within 2 fantasy points, you will win the free month of the Patreon. And for the score, I'm looking for their raw fantasy score, so not their captain score. Go ahead, give me that top score, give me that score that you guys are guessing, and if you get it right, you'll win a free month access. But I appreciate all your support here, as I said before. Go ahead, join the Patreon page if you want instant access to those spreadsheets and all the prop slips, and may we have ourselves an amazing Monday evening.